Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to our weekly Xfinity Pro Track Guide. This week we're going to be at Homestead, Miami Speedway. And as you can see, this is pretty much at sunset on our track conditions here. That's what you guys are going to be dealing with this week. So it's a week of a lot of track grip, just basically cooler track temps. It doesn't really matter where your ambient is. That's probably where your track temp's going to end up being. So the further you get into the race, most likely you'll probably get a little bit more of a tight condition, but you're still going to have some temperature drop, most likely in that case too. So this week we're going to go over some lane variations. Optimal lane, the opportunity to really get out of sync in your driving habits, and where to actually advocate towards your just ultimately your pace, right? Like you got to manage still in this car, and for purposes here, we're using a tighter option this week, just so you guys have a good understanding how important it is to hit the line, even with a tight or loose condition in the car. So Homestead's a track where on iRacing there's some opportunity to make some time up in 1 and 2, even 3 and 4 sometimes, and when you get too close to the wall, you have a little bit of car contact, and as you see on the screen here, I have a little bit of car contact. It didn't hurt the car or anything like that, but I just got done doing a 30 lap run here on the tighter version of our setup this week. So kind of diagnosing and giving you guys some tips towards what Homestead's going to be racing like. With the cooler conditions, you can definitely race everywhere on the track. The two optimal areas that you're going to be looking for is going to be your white line and ultimately right at the wall. Just having about an inch, a few inches away from the wall, getting most of the racetrack, and making a lot of your momentum for your exit of 2 and exit of 4. So I'm gonna let this play for one lap here. This so you guys can see, 32.94 starting out pace, and again, pretty cool track temperatures, right? So this is most likely about 10 minutes into the race. Obviously, you gotta do your qualifying, all that stuff. So it's borderline 10 minutes into a race here, starting at 5:45 in sim time. So I'm gonna let this start, and we're gonna kind of diagnose this with you guys. Wait line option here, a little bit of brake, obviously. Partial throttle just to get some some momentum built back up, and let this play out for this whole lap. Turn 3 is really a balanced corner that you can get out of sync real quick with. So you can tell I'm using the white line quite good. Not optimal to start off. There's some things I can clean up driver wise and do better, obviously, and getting the grip to the left front, getting better drive for exit. So I think I've done a better job in lap 2 here, and you tell we're in a 32.89. But with this cool track temp, your optimal race lap is probably going to be your second or third one if you guys just hit it correctly. Could even be your fourth one. So something that we could do early on in the run with these cooler track temps is a little bit of an arc. You still have a straight approach to the corner entry phase. Like you turn off the wall, you want to be turning before obviously you start your lifting phase. You can tell I'm turning into the corner because you can tell I'm turning away from the wall here, and shaping a little bit of wheel input into it. That way I know I'm loading the front with the same smoothness and consistency of when I'm flowing that radius into this bottom line here. So part throttle, getting off, relatively smoother all the way off, some braking. You can tell I'm at my max wheel angle for my straight line braking, right? So I'm not adding any more brake and wheel at the same time until I start needing to get down into this white line, crossing this seam. I'm not trying to shape too much wheel. You see I've got a little bit of counterbalance here at a going car here for you guys, so you guys can see this a little bit better of a perspective. And look at that sun. That's no good. We don't like that. So in that, you guys are going to be dealing with that quite often. I would say until it gets about 35, 40 minutes into the race. It's going to be pretty profound here, right? So let this play slow speed, turning off the wall. Again, shaping it just so I can get in the corner good. Part throttle. Minimal brake. So this is going to be even more induced long run. Why this is a trait that you got to really iron out to get to this white line for grip on this left front. The closer you get to this white line without obviously getting that banking transition to where you're actually getting to the apron part of this painted line, the better off you'll be, just because you're having a lot of grip right there. If you go over to the seam, you're going to feel how much grip you actually lose and really slide the whole car. You know, slide the tires up. The front won't have as much grip when you're actually running this line, just because the left front's not getting all that, ability to kind of basically wrap this white line. So part throttle phase is pretty smooth. I want to show that again. Pretty smooth in getting off the throttle, and then straight line my entry as much as possible with minimizing the wheel input. Partial brake, still trail braking into the corner, and there's going to be a point where I'm actually going to get to a rolling phase here, and that's when I'm crossing this seam. Well, this right front crosses this seam, as you can tell. It's crossing it, getting into it now, right here, and then I'm going to actually start releasing that brake pedal a little more in this rolling phase. I've done my best to make sure when I cross that seam, I got both front tires pointed to the white line at the smooth radius that I want. Not too early, not too late. Just as consistent balance, front to rear, balance-wise, and it's connected. So you got a rolling phase, part throttle. We're getting closer to this white line. You see that? And this is going to be more profound later on in the run. I'll show you guys. Part throttle. We're not just instantly back to full throttle here. So there's going to be a duration where this is going to be prolonged even throughout the run. And you could tell I'm part throttle for a good distance until I get to probably about the 5/8 mark. You can see this little, access road for this little break up in grass, little access road. It's probably the area I'm going to be consistently getting back to full throttle on short run, cool tires here. The longer you can hold this white line and not skew this rear end out, the better off you'll be, making time, cutting the exit, and just making sure you got all the grip and not sliding the tires. The more you get up crossing this seam, let's say we're crossing this seam with the right front, like up here, we're about half a lane higher. If we get off the seam too early, we're just going to be inducing a lot more of a banking transition over that seam and possibly inducing a little bit of slide and shearing effect to the right rear. And that's going to be even more profound, in hotter track conditions, but also more profound when you're in racing scenarios when you're trying, someone's trying to pinch you or you're trying to race somebody on an exit. You're going to have this avenue where you're going to just gas it up too hard sometimes. I'm guilty of it. Every single racer's guilty of it, because you're just in the moment. But when you get up across in the seam, sometimes it's just too early and you cut your exit to where you have to get out of the throttle and you're really just all up on the wheel having to just counter steer and just manage your exit. So the lower radius you have, the easier you have a straight line exit, arcing out to this wall on exit of 2. And it's the same thing for 3 and 4, the balance wise that you're looking for. You're turning into the corner, your trajectory is where you want to get to that white line at a smooth transition phase off the throttle. So this car is going to build freer under braking. It's just the reality of this car. You're going to build freer under braking because you're going to want to actually charge entry more with more brake pressure. And the platform of this car, the rear is going to build up height-wise because you're burning more fuel. And honestly, tires are also coming up to temperature, and they're going to build more temperature in these tires. So the car's just overall going to be a little higher in the rear than you're accustomed to short run. So you got to factor that into if you add more brake pressure. Might be a tendency the way you're actually inducing more of a free sensation once you're actually shaping this wheel into this lift, this lifting phase, and then you're trying to stab some brake into it while you have wheel input. You may have too much wheel input that you notice it's just getting you a little bit more free into this radius of 3 as well. As you can tell, part throttle, I'm starting to have a little bit of braking just to manage my entry speed so I can actually get below this seam. 3 and 4 is a very tricky track. Really option in what lane you want to run. So a lot of folks will want to drive in to use this seam as a tool, right? Like you're using this seam as a tool, and where you're crossing it is actually very important in cool track conditions, because this bottom lane, you're gonna want to make sure you're just ripping this, this bottom as much as you can. A later crossover point at this point, in a rolling phase, in the long run, you may just not have the grip in the front tires to actually keep this car pointing, to get to this white line. So it's all contingent on how you're actually getting off the throttle, before this painted line in a 3, and braking as straight as possible. You can tell at this phase, look at how much brake pressure I use. I'm pointing left while I'm using a little bit of brake. And I actually get a little bit heavier of a brake sensation with all the wheel angle I have, and I have to get back off of it. At that same moment, my mindset's just to make sure I'm getting into this corner entry as smooth as possible. And that cost me a little bit of balance getting into this corner. It wasn't a lot of lap time, but stuff like that adds up over a run, to where if you do that 20 to 35, 40 laps to a run at Homestead, a lot of times you start sliding this car with the rear, and you have to just wait and wait when you're crossing the seam and you're sliding the rear, and you're just really not having the lateral grip you need. So something to think about. You can't overcharge turn 3. It's always best to just find that point where you need to cross this seam, get to this white line, and hug this white line from center to the exit of turn 4. You can tell how much this car wants to continue pointing. Look how much it wants to point, using this white line as a tool. And once I get the right rear crossing, like right on top of the seam, you can tell I have a pretty aggressive balance shift. The car actually wants to steer back straight because it's crossing that seam in the left inside of the left rear. It's going, having a transition where I'm trying to counter steer it as well. You can see how much wheel I have counter steering it, and then it just grabs. So that's something as a driver you have to be on top of when you're running this bottom lane in 3 and 4. It is the longer duration, and this is just, you may not want to push these tires as hard early on, and if you can exit lower, like even half a car length lower than what I am here, a full car length lower to where you're wrapping this white line longer and having a straighter exit, your rear tires are going to be a lot happier once you get to that 25 to 35 stage. And you do have long runs here, so just something to think about for trying to wrap this white line and utilizing it the best you can. So I'm going to search around here a couple of laps. I'll dive into the top line, being probably more induced and consistent for pace wise for a lot of folks this week, since we're in cooler track conditions, and how to time getting to the wall, where to time it. Don't want to just take some pace off of it. The earlier you get to the wall, the better off you'll be in this car if you're just not overshooting entry. You can have a lot more center speed, just part throttle, instead of just trying to get right back to full throttle. So I want to go to another lap that I feel like I actually hit really good on the bottom line, and how much lower you need to get. Yep, you can tell first lap, second lap that I showed you guys, just obviously a few moments ago, to where now we're 12 laps for the run. You can tell how much lower I am trying to get to this painted line and hold it. This is a lot of grip, so you feel a lot of grip early, and even to this point, you will likely have a slightly snug phase at this point of a run with this car in our setup this week. And that's just to help keep the rear tires on it, obviously, but to make sure we're not making it tighter and getting off this line. You just don't want to make sure your response is heavier than this throttle input, right? So you can tell how much I got this car set. I probably am, a quarter of a tire width higher than I would absolutely like to have at this point. but you can tell how much part throttle I have to get back out of it. I mean, just a couple percent to 5%, just to make sure the front's still continuing, pointing the car for as long as I need to for exit. And again, like I was early into the run, this is a pretty good tool to realize that's where I'm going to be full throttle and that access road and exit as low as possible off of 1 to 2. Turn 3, same approach, lifting, getting a tiny bit of brake in a rolling phase just to make sure I got the balance I need, loading to the front tires when I'm actually getting to my brake pressure as well. So make sure I'm not overloading that. Crossing the seam, you're going to see I release the brake so I'm not inducing a slide. Still a rolling phase, and at this whole point you can see it may look like it's a skewed out, effect of the car, but this is a pretty neutral state of the car. Like I'm just letting the front end and the rear stay connected and helping the steering angle to stay consistent. Part throttle, there's an area I'm getting to part throttle, and I'm looking this again to keep my left front as close to this white line for exit as possible. And you cross over the seam, obviously. The wider you actually take the exit of turn 4, the easier it is to actually burn your right rear off and left rear, because you're just having to do just a tiny bit of micro adjustments, just counter steering just a hair, and that's inducing a little bit of a slide every time you cross this seam. It's not much, it's not a ton extra rear tire heat, but it's just something to keep in mind as well. Alright, so I'm going to go to, pretty sure there's a couple laps here into the run. There was one I absolutely tried running the top side here, and this is one of them. How I shortcutted getting to the wall. So like I turned off the wall, and I didn't get to it early enough, which actually might be this lap. So turning in, a little bit of brake. You can tell I'm about a lane off the wall right here, right? Like I'm not entering right on the wall. So the car may feel better at this phase to do this, and you may be able to actually cut this even more using the seam as a tool, or you just maybe using this seam as a tool for your long run as well instead of going up to the wall. But here as well, some avenues where I'm using part throttle. The closer I get to the wall, the tighter you're going to get when you're actually having this, because you got to manage where you're actually getting to it and not staying right on top of it. So have a pretty good exit. I'm off the wall still here. Get a little tight exit, a little bit of wall slap. That's just a little graze. And then top side here again. Enter a little bit closer to the wall on 3, just because that's just more natural feeling. You got a lot more of a bumpy transition into the center with all these bumps you got to navigate. I would say 3 and 4, so you got to just stay part throttle to keep your momentum, and then you actually will get tighter off of 4 than you would turn 2, just because of how much wheel radius you actually have to carry from center to the 5/8, 3/4, and full exit of 4. So it's easier to actually get, into the wall off of 4 than it is turn 2. Now I'm going to show you guys my last lap here, which is my lap 30, which I thought was a pretty efficient one, and how early I'm getting to the wall compared to what you just seen. You can see I'm staying up on the wall. I'm actually about half a lane higher now, and perfect world, I would probably be a tire width higher, and that's it. I don't want to induce a tight sensation the closer I get to the wall. Right up against it, able to turn off of it, a little loose condition, but we like loose. So let's go into turn 3, and this is probably the most optimal line you're going to have comparing the 2 for this outright solo. Now just run on the bottom 3 and 4, get on the bottom, get off the bottom a little bit because I just barely clipped the left front edge of the splitter. See if you guys can see this right on the apron. Like I'm barely put the left edge of the splitter on top of this white line, which is part of the apron, and I get off line just a hair. So my angle was pointed correctly. I just shortcut it just a hair, probably about like a foot, 6 inches to a foot, and I would have been able to wrap this exit a lot better. So, but yeah, that's 30 laps here. Some discussion and just talk about how we need to actually set up passes. You're going to be changing, the ebb and flow of this racetrack is kind of what you want to make it. And what I mean by that is you can bottom feed the whole time. You can change to where you're just ripping the top after a certain like 15 to 25 stage, but you're going to be at a risk of burning your rear tires up more often than not because you're carrying that much more center capability, and even that momentum's carried to that 3/4 mark. As you've seen in two, like I was skewing the car out quite a lot, right? So if you can refine that to where you're just consistently maybe not as pushing on a level of 9 out of 10, you may be able to go like a 6 to 7 at that stage and have better opportunity to keep running that line at the top side. So something to look at, something you guys are gonna have to kind of figure out yourself in that avenue as well. So personally, I always like just adventuring to either lane and seeing what works. I would try to stay away from that second lane as much as possible, and going to the seam at both ends, just using that seam as your weight line. There's going to be some options to where you might have to do that when you're racing side by side, which is understandable. Trying to keep some leverage, against the car inside, but it's pretty risky doing that as well because you're gonna get crossed up a little too much in the center and bound up. More often than not when you're putting so much center speed into it and shaping all the wheel angle you have into it as well. So easy to break free and easy to just get off kilter, on this track. So, but yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. Let me know what we can kind of do better with these videos if you guys have any ideas and maybe some concerns to kind of go over. I think in this week you probably will be short filling even, I wouldn't say even more, but getting your adjustments right for this type of cool track is gonna be induced to what you need as a driver, right? Like you wanna free it up. You need a freer option once you lower fuel, stuff like that. So that's something we'll kind of cover over future videos for sure. But it's really just depending on what you guys like in the car, right? So if you guys got questions, please just shoot them on, private message, or you can just use our Discord channel if you would like. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will see you guys next week.